Well, I think it's going to be an extremely exciting episode today.
I look forward to it.
Yeah, I want to welcome you both to the
you.
Peak Performance Life podcast, and I think that it's very exciting to have two very interesting characters, and I think that's really what we're going for with the show. Interesting, diverse interests and inspiring people, and you guys really sum that up.
Thank you
honor
so
us.
much.
Such a pleasure
We try to do what we can in our spare time.
Well, in your spare, when do you have this spare time? That's the thing. 'Cause I want to
Quite a
go through.
nebulous description of our time outside the hospital.
Yeah, I want to go through just some
Yes.
basic information on who you are. Drs Ashik and Ishq Pramchand,
Pleasure.
Thank you. Absolute
Twins.
honor to be on.
twins, medical doctors, pianists, martial artists, polyglots.
Yeah.
There's an author here.
Yeah.
There's a table tennis champion. There's the top medical school achiever.
Yes. Oh,
There-
goodness.
yeah, entrepreneurs, world travelers. How do you guys find the time?
Ashik, would you like to start?
You know,
You feel it, Ashik.
fair enough. I know we're asked this question a lot.
Yeah.
And I've sort of narrowed it down to a series of answers. And one that keeps coming up is that we sort of have to make time for what matters to us. And we'll find a way somehow, whether it's through effective scheduling, prioritization. Somehow you will find a way if it matters enough to you.
Yes. Always. I've found that, like, I don't want to make it too top heavy, meaning I don't want it to just be, okay, we have kind of read a philosophical book and we just followed along with it. I think it actually worked the opposite way, where actually when we were rather introduced to all of these things, we said, we love all of these things equally, and how are we going to sustainably keep all of these things going in our lives, and how are we going to get better at those? So we just tried to just divide our times up, and we tried that, we failed a lot, we kept trying again, and over time I think we were able to divide it where our day encapsulates everything, and we do a little bit of everything.
Okay.
And then when we read some philosophical, books like Atomic Habits or The Art of War, it kind of corroborated our growing worldview. So it was quite a good feeling to read it and say, wait, we are actually doing that stuff. It's a very satisfying feeling.
Yeah.
But I mean, we're always learning at the same time.
It's quite interesting because you often find that with twins you can have two very different personalities, and I'm sure you guys have very different personalities, but you're both very driven, you're both enthusiastic, you're both curious, and you both ooze positivity. So there must be something else going on. How is it that you have both developed this common drive?
It's interesting that you say that, Mr. Sahil, and I've often contemplated it myself. And I often see Ishq and myself as having a sort of yin and yang relationship, that we differ in many subtle ways, but we end up complementing our abilities, and especially our constant communication with each other. I think that's an advantage that we've had that a lot of people don't, is that we always have conversations, and when you have it with somebody who's at roughly the same level as you, you can identify your own flaws a lot more easily. You analyze situations, opportunities, and people a lot better, which helps you study and approach problems in life with a multifaceted perspective. I think that helps a lot.
I think our energies bounce off each other all the time, and the verbal communication and also the non-verbal communication, just being around Ashik in the same vicinity, we'd usually be doing the same thing at different points in time. For example, studying, which we are preparing for some exams at the moment, and we'll just be studying in the room together, but we won't be talking to each other, but just to the point that both of us will be studying there, you feel some form of unity in the air, and that keeps you going. And maybe also to add to the part where, like, how do we keep optimistic all the time? Where do we get our energy from? I mean, most of the doctors at hospital and the nurses ask us when we post call and we're on call even at late hours of the day, how are you still full of energy, and how are you happy? Other doctors, like, they just want to get the work done and go to sleep, but why do you always hang around to have conversations with everyone? Why do you laugh so much? It's not the environment for that, it's very clinical, so people often ask us that. And I just think it's because we love people so much. I think we get, rather than the notion of getting inspiration and motivation from yourself, I think we get inspiration from other people. Every time we talk to someone, we get a new bit of their life, and we find that very interesting. We want to know more about other people. And that kind of inspires us and drives us more. So we get energy from everything around us, I think.
I think our communication segues into that as well, because the communication skills that we develop together have allowed us to connect with other people a lot better. And by approaching other people with that same mindset, that you can always learn and increase your value and value in others by interacting with them, that makes that's incentive for meeting new people and finding joy in interacting with others.
And the concept of lifelong learning, essentially, I think they hammer it into us on an academic level, where as medical practitioners you have to study all the time to be able to deliver the best possible medical care to your patients. But I think that also oozes into your other aspects of life as well. You shouldn't ever want to stagnate. You should always feel like you should want to get better at something, whether it be music or martial arts or even reading itself. I mean, reading fictional books or reading anything that you like, you should just keep at it. Because if you even do a little bit every day, 1 minute, 30 seconds even, and build it up slowly so that you can't, it doesn't become overwhelming for you, then I think you'll essentially find more out of life. You'll get more out of it.
But this is what I think is really interesting, because what you say is absolutely correct, but different people are driven for different reasons. So you find that a lot of people will chase continual learning for recognition or for status or for something like that. But you two have a very different drive. Those don't seem to be your goals. You're learning for the sake of learning. And what drives that? How does that happen? It's a rare gift, right?
Yes.
So certainly. I think it's...
I agree with that, actually. I didn't think about that until...
I think there are many levels to finding value in learning. And it's a powerful galvanizing force, like you say, Mr. Sayal, drives people. I think there's many levels of it. At a more superficial level, many of us do it for survival. We learn things to help us approach daily problems in life, whether at work, at home. So the more you learn, the more knowledge you have to combat challenging situations. But then at a deeper level, you ask yourself, why am I here? And what am I doing? Like, where do I see myself in 50, 60, 70 years? And these are big questions that some people never really delve into. And by learning, you sort of find a way to more ways of answering that question. I think that's one thing that drives me. So is to find purpose in what I'm doing. And learning, like even the fact that you're moving forward towards destination, even if you don't know the clear direction, at least you are moving forward. Means that you're at least getting closer to the goal.
Some form of progress. I think because it's a very big question as to why we like to do things and like why we like to keep busy, especially with very often things that are bigger than us. I mean, a lot of the stuff that we are into are not easy things, and like it makes us it humbles us when we do it. But at the back of our mind, I would like to ask myself as how would you become the best possible version of yourself? But what underpins that motto, I think, is a primarily altruistic drive, where you feel as if you want to help people, and the only way to help someone is to have a great control over yourself. You have to essentially deliver something to someone which is of absolute value. And behind that, I think maybe, apart from genetics, I think our parents raised us up with the idea that you should always do something with intention. You should always want to do it to the best of your ability, and just do the best for your fellow man. I mean, both our parents are quite academic in nature and scientific in a way. So I think that's possibly where it may stem from. From a young age, we've been exposed to this. I think from before we were actually conscious of our efforts.
I think that's, and Ishq articulates it quite well. I think like you, for example, Sal, I've seen that in how you raise your son to learn the piano, and it's a multi-pronged approach involving multiple people.
Yes, it's not only one person.
Indeed, and then the more you learn in different ways, the more you approach the Renaissance man strategy.
Yes, exactly.
The more you learn the more things you learn, the more you realize how well they connect with each other. You'll find underlying connections between your interests, and that can extend to so many other things in life. Say music, for example. You know, Mr. Sahil. You show an interest in music, and by showing and by learning more about music, you learn more about how to understand harmony, the rhythms that underpin everyday life, patterns, which translate to so many other aspects of life. So by learning so many other things, you actually delve deeper into a lot more things than you would expect. I think there was a book I read about the book. It's called The Book of Five Rings by Musashi. I'm very fond of his writing, and in one of his quotes in the book, he mentions that you, from one thing, you should learn 10,000 things. Yes. And it's true. And by extension, if you learn 1,000 things from 10,000 things, I mean, it just scales up like that exponentially.
I imagine if you learn one discipline, you're forming neural pathways in a particular network, and the more you learn, you're developing broader networks. But at some stage, maybe they intersect or interrelate, or something happens like this.
There was actually quite an interesting conversation I had with one of my seniors in theatre. We just doped a patient, and anesthetics in general is a very physiology-based discipline where they try to understand about how the cellular mechanics work and the biology to deliver the effects, which they do, which you see. And the senior just asked, when studying for exams, how do you remember all this stuff? I mean, isn't there a limit to what the human brain can actually remember? And I had an answer for her, but it was based on my reading of physiology from just a textbook. It was just in medical school, I read it, I found it very interesting. It was central nervous system physiology, and I'm sure Ashiq also may have also come across it. But there was this concept of neuronal divergence or neuronal plasticity, which actually falls more into pediatric neurology, where children their brains are very plastic, they're dynamic, they're always growing, and therefore they learn things very much faster than everyone else. People mostly think that disappears because your brain often develops fully, certain resources say by the age of 20 to 22, and they say essentially you're fixed in your ways. But neurons, it's essentially a tree-like structure where one neuron branches to 1,000 different neurons, and that area where they join isn't a physical gap, a physical connection between them. It's actually just a gap between them where you release neurotransmitters in there. And the effects, essentially your thinking processes and the effects of what happened is actually in that cleft.
Okay.
And there are billions of clefts throughout the brain, and they change over time, and the different neurotransmitters do different things. So that could possibly explain why we can remember different things and form connections with other things, because it's not that you have a certain place in your brain for martial arts, for academics, for music. It's all in the same place.
It's one supercomputer.
It's one supercomputer, and it's the same information going along the same neuron, but you are making different deductions on it based on that neurotransmitter burst reaction. It's incredibly interesting, and I speak as if I know everything about it, but I actually don't. There's too much to know, and it's actually not very well understood
It's
at
so
all.
interesting you're talking about that. I was reading something this morning, actually, by a psychologist. And in the book, she was talking about the level to which kids learn and how they learn, like you say, from 0 to 7. And then the process changes after that. And they're less sponge-like. They absorb information less efficiently. But if you think about it, what happens at age 7? You go to school. The way in which you learn changes. It becomes more structured and more rigid. But prior to that, you're learning things experientially, and you have the sense of play. And when you have that sense of play when you're learning something, you actually learn it a lot better.
Absolutely.
You're a lot more engaged and involved as opposed to someone directing information at you that you must learn.
Absolutely.
And often we feel a bit suppressed.
And even to elaborate on that, I think that a lot of people become averse to learning because of that model of teaching that is enforced at a young age. It's you learn because you have to. You learn because you have to get into a career that's prestigious, that's well supported by your family, that will earn you the financial income to live the life that is socially acceptable for everyone else. I think that sort of discourages people from learning for the sake of it. Because if you enjoy what you do and enjoy learning in the field of interest, you would perform much better, I would imagine.
But that also lends itself to our discipline of practice. The doctor-patient model has changed completely from a few years ago. They used to call it a paternalistic model where doctor knows best and he has the best possible solution, so you just have to listen to me. I essentially know the medication I want to give you, I know your diagnosis, so you just have to take whatever I tell you. It's actually changed to a collaborative model where you actually have to collaborate an optimal treatment plan with your patient, which involves a lot of discussion and a lot of introspection. So that also would relate to that quite a bit, where you would actually, rather than being quite didactic in your style, you actually have to be quite empathetic to be with someone. You have to understand them in their context, being an individual, before coming to the conclusion that this patient can take this medication, when actually, for example, you're giving a bottle of pills to a 76-year-old female who lives on her own when she has arthritis and can't open the bottle on her own. So you have to consider all those things. You have to say, you know what, consider the whole picture. So I think it lends itself to that aspect of our life as well.
Do you think that to some level, the degree to which you're inspired to take on new challenges was perhaps due to your close relationship? And how do you think it may have been if you weren't born twins? If, for example, you didn't have brothers?
That's a fascinating question you ask.
Because you do almost everything together.
That's true, actually. And we even complete each other's sentences. It's non-intentional, of course.
I have often thought about that as well. There's this concept in biology that helps me understand the model of that and how I would respond to that. It's like in every human being, a cell will have a pair of chromosomes. And in men have X and Y, and then females have X and X. And chromosomes sort of help each other overcome their weaknesses. That's why we inherit a pair of them. And when one chromosome helps the other, they work in tandem to help the body survive. And I think Ishq and I have the advantage of that. If I'm weak in something, I can see where Ishq is stronger. And I see, okay, this is somebody who I'm spending a lot of time with, and I know what he's doing behind the scenes to help him overcome this weakness. So I have insight into a bona fide strategy to approaching my weaknesses that I think a lot of people don't get. Because say if you want to solve a problem, you say, you know, what am I doing wrong? You go online, you talk to friends, they'll give you some advice. But you don't get the full picture. You'll get like, oh, this is how I overcame success on YouTube and whatever. And versus actually spending every day with them and seeing this is what they do, I know exactly how they're approaching it. But as to how we would have been without each other, that's anyone's guess. But I don't think I would.
So hard to comprehend.
I don't think I would have come as far without him.
Even in school, he was better at certain subjects than I was. It was so clear. I remember his English marks were far better than my English marks. I didn't read much. Ashiq was more of a reader when we were smaller. And I always, essentially, as I got closer to matric, I started getting a bit more serious about academics and marks. And essentially, the career dictated the amount of marks I had to achieve, or how good your pass was. So English was always the lacking factor. I mean, mathematics you're doing okay, and all of the scientific stuff you can work out, but English is the thing that's kind of always bringing things down. So then I said, why are his marks higher? And he just reads in his spare time, whatever spare time means. But he just reads, and I said, wait. My thought when I saw that was, he doesn't, like, you know what, he's not reading for hours a day, he's not reading for like 2 hours a day. So I'm thinking, when I was younger, how is this actually making an impact on his life? But actually, consistently reading for 20 minutes, 5 minutes a day compounds. And when you actually sit down to write that English exam, you're so inspired by an antecedent amount of knowledge, you don't really have to think much, compared to like, oh, you know what, I have to read a whole book before an exam. And after I started doing that, our English marks actually were the same in the end in matric. So then it just kind of, came together.
Well, I hope my son is going to watch this. Because I've been encouraging him to read.
Too. Yes, oh gosh, boys in English, I'm not sure. Languages.
That's where the shortfall is.
And Afrikaans.
Doesn't read.
But that is a trait I've noticed in highly successful people is that they do read like anything, whether it's like magazines, business reports, books, research papers. Because this is peak performance, right? And many people who've created something in the form of writing, have shown to the world that they can condense their thoughts and experiences into a way that can be shared with other people.
Yes.
Like a podcast, for example.
Yes.
It's the same thing. If you can, like, no matter how much of a genius you are, if you can't tell somebody what your thought process is, then you'll be
in the simplest possible way.
Then you'll be forgotten.
It probably means you don't understand it yourself.
And books, I think, allow us that advantage. And it's just something I've noticed in a lot of successful people I've met, is that they tend to read frequently about a lot of different things.
Yes.
What are you guys reading at the moment?
At the moment, I'm reading Atomic Habits, actually, which Ashiq inspired.
Yes.
I listened to the short form on my way home. I completed the book on the app.
Yeah.
But I said I wanted to actually read the book after
Yeah.
that because it was quite inspiring. So I just got into the book. I'm halfway through it, and it's been a pretty good read. It's major. It's kind of self-help, definitely philosophy.
Yeah.
So I've read many philosophical books actually in the past. So I think I'm enjoying this one quite a lot.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you, Ashiq?
On my side, I actually just finished listening to an audiobook called about the massacre of Nanking. Fascinating, essential piece of World War II history. And now moving on to another book, The Soul of Japan in Bushido philosophy, which is something that has always interested me and something that we've embodied since our adventures in Japan.
Yeah. I think also Ashiq and I were always together when we were younger. In terms of, we had friends, but at the end of the day, we were best friends all the time. Of course, we fought when we were younger. We didn't get on when we were small in terms of, like, you know, petty things, sharing clothes and whatever.
Yeah.
That, of course, is expected. And in school, I think we got closer to each other. There was always a bit of a competitiveness where, you know, you'll get 2 marks higher than the other and you'll fight about it and fine. But our parents always told us from a young age that, you know, you'll always be, at the end of the day, you always have each other, and essentially it's just the two of you.
Yeah.
So you can choose whether you want to be friends and get along together and collaborate, or you can be enemies. You can choose. But it's only gonna disadvantage you if you don't work together. So we tried out the former, where we tried to collaborate and we were sent to work together. Of course, we have differing personalities, different mindsets, and different views on things. So, of course, we clashed here and there, but I think over time, as we learned to work with each other more, especially in medical school, and even more in internship, I think we learned to understand each other more and actually see things from the other person's perspective. And from a young age, I think it helped to build our self-esteem and personality in the way where you don't need to succumb to peer pressure to be cool. I think because we had each other, I think that could explain why we don't drink alcohol, we don't smoke, we don't really do those type of things. Nothing wrong with those things, but I mean, we just, I think, just kind of, also we never grew up in an environment where no one essentially did that type of stuff. So I think we'd always kind of want to do things which we considered productive, like reading or hobbies, like
things that help you grow.
I would think so. Things that are long-term, things that are not really short-term gratification. I mean, there is always place for a party or a good weekend. That's excellent. But I think when you think more long-term, those things require effort and time. And I think to have that mindset, I think you get a bit more serious about your weekends. You actually end up doing work on your weekends. You like doing the work on your weekends. You'd rather spend time doing things that actually can help you grow.
But I think for people who would watch this and listen to you, they would have the impression that maybe you guys don't enjoy your lives. But you guys have a great time.
Yeah, fun.
You guys enjoy your lives.
Totally. I think we're a bit too fun at times. We dance too much, actually. At parties. Whenever we have fun, we work hard, we play extremely hard, I think.
But then that's something that we advocate for everyone, right? You have to find fun in whatever you do. And whether it's hobbies or whatever, you do what you find enjoyable and that you know is going to and that will yield dividends, I feel. If you have good intentions and if you do what you enjoy for most of the time, you can live a happy life.
And you should be able to integrate into anything. And being so hectically academic orientated through medicine, hectically academic in that way, having the balance of culture and art and sports is great. But also relationship-wise, I mean, we've both had a good deal of girlfriends in the past. Okay. We've both had good experiences in medical school. So we made sure, just try that out, because essentially we didn't want it to be a regret through our medical
Yeah.
school not to essentially, have a girlfriend through at least university. So we've had that, we enjoyed it, and essentially we got the experiences.
Okay.
So yeah, we try to essentially be all-rounded in that way. Yeah.
So, I can't remember who said it, but somebody said that you become the average of the 5 people you associate with the most. And I think with you two always being together, that formula changes slightly because the influence that you have on each other is actually so powerful and so immediate.
Yes.
I think it's possibly a very strong supportive factor in your roles.
Yes.
Undoubtedly, I agree with you wholeheartedly, Mr. Sile. I think it's something that a lot of people seek in life, in a partner, for example, in a partner, their children. Having people underestimate the value of that statement that you said, Mr. Sile, and it's a trend that I've noticed in a lot of people with whom we've interacted, that their friend groups tend to shrink as they mature, and you'll find people with common interests who tend to associate with you, and there are very few people who will have almost all of the same principles that guide them in life. And if you find those people, I say you're very lucky.
I think so.
I like that at the Pencil Club. That's the philosophy behind it, and they've supported efforts like yours to run podcasts and to bring people together.
Brilliant.
I think the other thing that we have to do is we have to really send a shout out and a debt of gratitude to your parents.
Oh, yeah.
Because they've raised 2 absolutely polite gentlemen.
Oh, you're,
Thank you.
Too
Thank
kind,
you so
sir.
much.
Thank
You
you.
both ooze that
Thank you.
kindness, and you're always unbelievably polite.
Oh,
Too
I
much,
wonder if there's
actually.
something going on. in the background, you know?
Look
Too
at
much.
Look at me.
They often tell us at hospital, stop saying thank you. Stop saying thank you.
Too kind,
You said
sir.
thank you so many times, but I'm saying, yes, thank you. I can't thank you enough.
But
Yeah.
it's interesting that you say that, because if there's one thing that I've learned from my parents that has earned me more value relative to effort invested into anything, it's probably manners
Yes.
and politeness.
Always.
In my readings of some Buddhist scriptures as well, there's this section which mentions that the ocean is the greatest source of water because it allows itself to be the lowest source of water. So by the humility and by respecting the value that you can give to someone and that they can give to you, you allow yourself to gain all that value through your interaction with them.
Yeah.
That comes from humility, politeness, and respecting the other person.
I think Schopenhauer said, politeness is to human nature as warmth is to wax.
Yes.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
So that how that I can see how that
One cannot survive
Yes.
without
one
the
can
other.
survive
Yeah.
without it. It's essential, and they shape each other.
Yes. Yeah. It
I think that's, and
softens the person you speak
of
to.
course it does. And I think people think that you have to go through great strides to connect with someone. But not really. The easiest way to connect with someone is to refer to them by their name, which shows an amazing amount of respect and humility towards them. It works every day for us at the hospital. Mostly at the hospital, because it also works outside of the hospital, but we've just noticed it more at our workplace. Often nurses are underappreciated in their
Yes.
time. They actually are the ones who save the patients.
Yes.
We kind of just write or do the writing, and we essentially sign off and we do the management plan. But the actual implementation of what we preach is done through nurses, and just by referring to a nurse by her name, just when you request something, the entire conversation changes completely. You notice that it's a more friendly type of interaction. They appreciate what you say. It's not essentially ungrateful. Many people just ask and order people around, and it creates this atmosphere of just ordering around and a bit of arrogance from I'm the doctor, you the nurse.
Stratifies
Yes.
the
And that's not how it should
relationships.
be. It shouldn't be that. But I feel just being humble and respecting someone else goes a great way.
Because as Ishq said, I think like there are a few other places where I've seen greater value in humility and respect than in the hospital environment. There are people. If we think of COVID times as well, a lot of the doctors will call it the great leveler, that many people from the highest to the lowest socioeconomic circumstances were affected pretty much equally across the board. some might even say that those who are wealthier were more disadvantaged because of the lifestyle that they lead. But in a place where there is so much suffering, people die every day. Like how much money you have, your title, it matters little to them. Sometimes the best thing you can give someone in their dying moments is a kind word.
Exactly.
And like, no matter whether you're driving, you're taking an Uber to get to hospital, or you're driving a Ferrari out of there, the person who's suffering will remember for how you treated them,
how kind
as
you
a
were.
person, not how many medications you gave to them. Even the people you work with, they have seen the full gamut of suffering. Eventually, things like money and status mean very little to them. It's whether you're invested in them as people.
Yes.
And that comes from respect, no matter where you are. If you can treat a cleaner in the hospital as you can the head of your department, you'll see that we're all human beings at the end, with equal vulnerabilities. Because that's what a hospital does. It aims to treat, to help you manage those vulnerabilities and live through them.
And even such kindness and empathy works at a physiological level. It's not just kind and empathy and people are just friendly with each other. Being in this rotation of anesthetics, the kinder you are and the more empathetic you are towards a patient before you bring them into theatre, it essentially lets them feel a bit more comfortable. Their blood pressure doesn't spike, their pain levels don't spike. So if you're able to be kind enough without the use of any medication or any analgesic, you can actually keep the patient's pain levels and blood pressure stable throughout the operation. If those are unstable, it makes the operation more difficult. And that comes from no price at all. You're just being kind.
You're getting
just
so much value.
referring to them by their name, and you are just being good to them. You're just being a fellow human to them at the end of the day.
And it's of no cost.
Nothing.
It's like hardly any effort to remember somebody's
That's
name.
why we can't
And just
believe
say
it
please and
sometimes.
thank you.
Some people can't relate. Sometimes they feel that they're hitting a brick wall. No, why is every day at hospital so difficult for me, and why am I not connecting with patients? Often it's because of that. It's so simple. Just look them into the eyes and greet them and say, how is your day? How are you?
Yes.
Just ask them that.
But it has to also be genuine.
It has to
of
be from a
course.
genuine place.
Indeed.
You should want to do that.
A lot of my reading of Eastern philosophy, Confucianism, Buddhism, most of what you can find from Japanese philosophers, the idea of killing the ego is a very strong theme there. And I don't think largely it stems from a more communal mindset that that the people of the East have developed. That you sort of have to humble yourself to interact with others, and to abandon the sense of I am the center of the universe, which is something that's becoming more prevalent in Western philosophy, I think. And I think that a lot of people that I know have been misguided by that. They think that it's their way or the highway. It's like, why am I not happy? Why is this happening to me? Most of the time, you're doing it to yourself.
Often, there are some other philosophical books like the Tao Te Ching or even The Art of War. Even there is something about. There was quite a small book, short but quite profound in what it delivered. It's the way of the samurai, the way a samurai lives. The Hagakure, I have it upstairs. And most of those principles work on the premise that you essentially, at some point you will die. I'm just being quite open about it. And it's quite a shocking opening line of a book, to open a book and say, your life is finite, you only have a few, you only have a few years in this lifetime, and you essentially have to make the best use of it. So there's one way to deal with that harrowing truth, and that's essentially to just let go. Let go of your let go of your ego, and letting go of your ego helps you transcend to different levels in different aspects of your life. And I think that's one thing that drives us as well, especially when in the academic setting of a hospital where you're treating patients who die all the time around you. That's one great way to cope about it. You respect death for what it is, and you also respect your patients, and that makes you a better doctor as well. That actually makes you appreciate delivering medication which prolongs life, and that also makes you more careful when prescribing that medication. You're not only prolonging life for the quantity of years, but also the quality of years, to make sure that your patient actually has the best possible years in the terminal phase of their life. I feel that rang quite profoundly with me when I read the book. Essentially, when I read these books, it's in the position where we already graduated as medical doctors, and often reading these books, you can't help but reflect on your everyday life, and you read a principle which is philosophical, and those are just quite equivocal philosophies. They can apply to anyone. You are neither here nor there, and they're not didactic. They're essentially like, one of the lines in The Art of War, for example, is essentially, to be successful in something, you should neither be too close and you should neither be too far at the same time. And that can be interpreted any way you want it to be. So coming from a position of being a medical practitioner or even a pianist, you often take that in and you say, how do you essentially succeed? And that is, you never admit you know everything. And if someone asks you, do you know everything? You should actually admit, no, I don't. I'm actually a beginner at something. Even if you've done 50 years of it, you still are a beginner. You're a novice at something, and you should be able to be strong enough to admit that. And that type of mindset actually essentially keeps you more sentient to everything around you, and it accelerates your learning process.
Well, this is, if you think about the way we look at belts in martial arts, for example.
Yes.
Belts were color graded for a Western audience to make it easier to differentiate beginners from supposed masters. But it's only in the West where the black belt is seen as kind of a master status, because you will know this, but in Japan traditionally, they did not color the belt.
They didn't, exactly.
The belt was a white belt, but the tradition was to wash the gi, but never to wash the belt. So over years, it would accumulate sweat and dirt and so on, and the color would change. It would become darker. And this became the origin of the darker belt.
That's very
so that was associated with some level of mastery. But the grade of Shodan is first dan. It means you're a beginner now that you know the basics. So you can train for however many years, 10 years or 15 years in a particular discipline, and once you reach a Dan status, first degree black belt, you are now a beginner.
Yes.
Ties in quite nicely.
And I respect that view because it also encourages those who look outwards and into the discipline, that you can also learn from people who haven't trained as much as you. Because I think the mistake that a lot of people make around in societies that are developed along with the Western philosophies is that you're so, like, there's a hierarchy. You need to do a certain amount of time and experience before you can be either higher ranking or better than everyone else. But there's somebody who can just be starting out and you can still learn something from them. I think we must always remind ourselves of that, which ties in well with our early discussion about humility as well.
And also curiosity. There was another philosophical novel I read, but it was quite a nice twist on it. It's not the kind of heavy notion of, just primary philosophy and explanations based on Confucius or those philosophers of the time. But there was quite a nice accessible novel. It was The Tower of Pooh and the Tale of Piglet, if you maybe heard of it. It's lying around at home as well. But I read it and I was deeply satisfied with it because I liked the image of Winnie the Pooh as someone who is curious, who is a beginner at something, and who is often so curious that he often is, by superficially, he's seen as someone very clumsy or kind of interpreted as very inexperienced. But actually, there's deeper philosophy in there, and actually through that curiosity, through that beginner approach, you're open to your entire environment. You absorb much more than everyone else, and in the end, you are actually content. You're actually quite happy where you are. You're actually taking life for what it is, and you're actually learning faster than most people because you're actually taking a simple thing like looking at honey in a pot, which Winnie the Pooh does, and he asks deep questions about those. From the series, I can't remember the exact questions, but it's very comical, but at the same time he's asking the questions because he's curious. And I quite enjoyed that novel as well.
Which ties into early discussion about the value of neuroplasticity as well. The children
that's it, and that's what it relates to. Children are often curious, they hurt themselves, they go through a sampling period, and often what I've found when you're older and you develop your fixed hobbies that you can swear by, for example, the piano playing or martial arts and sports, I think you have to go through quite a good sampling period when you're younger. For example, when we were younger, we did quite a lot of sports. We swam competitively. We did the Midmar Mile. We played a lot of tennis. We did a lot of table tennis, as you've heard. We've done all those things, and we enjoy them from time to time. Like, say, when we have a day off or day free, we'll go play a game of tennis, or we'll play some table tennis on our table tennis board upstairs. But our primary focus at the moment, every Monday and Wednesday, we do Kung Fu at the Chinese Martial Arts and Healthcare Center, and we enjoy that. And I'm sure you understand that it's this as well, Sahil. You also do Russian martial arts as well.
Yes.
Yeah, so I feel like you have to get exposure to a great amount of things before you actually say, wait, I've tried a lot of things and I actually want to do something, and you can actually know that you can sustain it for a few years.
You have to.
A few more years, and hopefully for a lifetime.
I think you can often start something with a passion because it's something new, it's something different, so you can dive into it and get excited about it, and you could even practice something for a few years and realize later maybe it's not for me. But with that excitement that you have in the beginning, you may not be sure that that's the case long term. So it is a good idea to try a bunch of different things and hone your skills, let them evolve. Did you both always want to be doctors?
I first remember wanting to study medicine when I used to look through my dad's old medical journals that used to leave lying around around the house. And the pictures fascinated me. I thought, I never knew that this could happen to a human being.
Oh yes, the encyclopedia in the library.
Yeah, and it's all these colorful pictures, and think, is this really what's happening inside of us? I think that's when that sparked my first interest in the field. And of course, there were multiple factors that came into it. Our dad encouraged it for various reasons. He said, you know what, I have experience. I can tell you it's a promising career. It's good. It's rewarding both. Emotionally and financially, there's a lot of potential for growth in the field, good job security, all those factors.
Good theory, practical guidance.
And that guidance helped, but ultimately it was a choice we made by ourselves for me at least, from a young age. Do you remember when?
What I remember when we were young is that our dad used to take us with him when we were really small, like maybe 3 or 4, and he used to take us to his clinic, his practice, and it was just, he'd just take us there, and he would see patients, and we'd kind of course play on the side. And maybe that was subliminal, I'm not sure. Maybe it got encoded somewhere, but it feels very comfortable to be in a clinic setting. It feels like it's not something that it's not like a situation where you're a fish out of water. It feels like we're very comfortable, like we essentially were exposed to this, and we were. I think that we attributed to that when we were younger. We went to our dad's clinic, and also the encyclopedia story is that Ashiq. I remember once he read this encyclopedia in the library and it was that old encyclopedia. It was like an old copy, and then he read through the medical section, and he told all of us about smallpox. And he was like 6 or something. And he said, "No, smallpox is this, and it's actually rife here." And it was cool because it was like something so new and human disease and whatever, and it was so interesting because he saw this picture of smallpox with that very bad rash that you get, and
you found that fascinating.
Yeah, I found it so fascinating, and it was so odd to me but it was ironic because the disease was well eradicated before our time. So it was very interesting nevertheless. But then over time, I think over school, I didn't know what I wanted to become throughout primary school yet. Our parents they never forced us in a direction. They said just enjoy everything. Throughout matric and school, I think matric is where you have to know because you're making applications for university, grade 11 and matric. But I think from grade 8 to grade 10, because I also did drama as well, I did acting, I did music, I often thought of those as pretty good places to go because I enjoyed it. I enjoyed being on stage, I enjoyed playing the piano, I enjoyed that type of theatrical skill. But when it came to grade 11 and grade 12, when I got more exposure to biology and the human system, I often thought, wait, this is interesting as well. But it's a lot to learn. So can I ever, and I asked myself the question, can I ever be in a position where I can do both? Where I can I be a musician and be a doctor? And I said, probably not. Or can you be a doctor and can you be a musician? And he said, you can actually, you can get away with it. You may not be being a concert pianist, but you can aspire to be one. You can get to those pieces by doing a little bit every day. And I felt that actually works out quite nicely. So I think that kind of kicked us in that direction. A lot of family influence, our environmental factors, and also it actually became more and more interesting over time. I didn't find it interesting initially. I thought it was quite because my study strategy improved over time, and the ability to sort things was quite boring to me at a young age. So I said, you know what, I like things which are more immediate, like mathematics. You don't have to study much.
Yeah.
You if you get it, you get it.
It's the logic.
It's the logic, and even Afrikaans in school, like I enjoyed that quite a bit. So didn't really put a lot of like you didn't have to think too hard, but you study with your hours, but you don't have to put too much of thought about how you can go around it. Something like biology, you have to actually sit there and study things you don't understand particularly, but you just swat it and answer things in a test. But as it went on, I matured a bit more with my mindset, and I say, wait, most of the good, sweet things in life happen with a large amount of effort. And I said, yes, I think that's the way to go. Studying all the time, and you get greater dividends from those.
Yeah. I think something that viewers perhaps overseas may not understand are the benefits of studying medicine in a third world country.
Oh, yes.
Because you will be exposed to afflictions that are not really seen in the West. And I know this from a story with my father in practice in the 70s. He diagnosed, I think, the first case of leprosy that had been seen in something like 40 or 50 years. Because he recognized it from India. He saw it all the time. Because the patient had presented with all these symptoms and nobody understood what was happening. And when she saw my dad asked her, does it feel like you're walking on cotton wool? And she said yes. And this was how they would diagnose it, and he ended up on some radio talk show after that to talk about it. But it was seen as something really incredible and insightful, but for him it was just normal. And I know this from another family member, for example, who lives in the States, and she had TB, but it took them 9 months to diagnose it.
Because it's so uncommon. Right?
Yeah. So what are the interesting things that you guys have seen that viewers would find interesting?
We've seen so much over the past, not even the past 2 years, I think since the inception of our clinical years.
There's a wealth of clinical information in South Africa. It actually helped me publish a few papers on some very rare cases.
Something on uterine bleeding.
Yes, that's right.
Klippelfeldtrenee.
I think it's sort of a double-edged sword. But there's much to be desired in terms of public health and preventative health in South Africa. So what happens is that for many patients, they don't get treatment early. And it reaches a complicated stage where many diseases aren't detected until it's causing near life-threatening problems for our patients. And you don't see that a lot in developed countries. There are many doctors from Scotland, Europe, the US come here to see cases. When you tell people that every day when we're on night shift, you're seeing 5-6 gunshot wounds to the abdomen, a gunshot wound to the heart, stab to the heart. That's few and far between in a developed country. When we see that, they're like, "What? You're seeing this every night?" I think that leads to the interesting stuff. Severe pathologies that are interesting to write about, difficult for the patient, but it makes for a wealth of clinical information.
A typical night shift in casualty and this happened last year, where actually I don't know how our call schedules always coincide, but both of us were on call on the 25th of December and the 31st of January. I was in casualty, and the December period is notorious for being... the nurses and the administrative staff refer to it as a bloodbath. That's what they refer to it as. Casualty is full in terms of the bed capacity is overflowing, and also they get other beds from other departments to just place in casualty. They have to put beds in between other beds. And it is literally a bloodbath. You'll get patients coming in with gunshot neck, gunshot abdomen, gunshot stomach, gunshot abdomen anywhere. And you have to book them for surgery immediately. But how can you do that when there's 5 patients which just came in who all have the same thing? And so we're overwhelming the capacity of the theater. But at the same time, it may sound very morbid, but it's very exciting.
It's an adrenaline rush.
It's an adrenaline rush. You actually feel that you have to work at your optimal level. I don't know where we get that energy.
Peak performance.
Peak performance. I don't know where we get that at 3 a.m. or 2 a.m., but you find it somewhere. and you just essentially do the diagnosis. All of your skills come into play there. You take a quick history, you do a quick exam, you do a quick assessment, quick diagnosis, and you plan the patient. You give them a drip, you take bloods from them, you put up an IV line, and you get them up to theatre to stop the bleeding. But
it becomes spiritual at some point.
So much.
Surprisingly, I've had a discussion.
That's the only thing which lets you, which keeps you going at 34 hours post night call, where you don't have sleep and you're still walking around at 3 p.m. the next day, where you have 2 laparotomies pending, and you have to sit through that. And I think spirituality is the only thing that can take you through.
Weirdly enough, like Ishq and I have spoken about it with a few other seniors as well, and we ask how do you get through it, and it's amazing. Like when the body starts failing, whether through exhaustion or whatever, the mind starts failing, then it becomes like sometimes prayer and hope is the one thing you have left to rely on, and it's surprising how suffering makes you more spiritual in that way. I think many people, I think that's also part Buddhist, part Christian as well, the idea of crucifixion. The crucible, like suffering brings you closer to God in a strange way.
I think it goes back to what we were talking about earlier, because suffering over this prolonged period strips you of your ego.
It does.
It brings you closer.
Exactly.
It does.
Exactly.
And I've also found that during those moments of pressure, those moments of truth, which actually shows who you are as a person, you're completely bare at 4 a.m., 3 a.m. in the morning.
Dehydrated.
There's really nothing that there's no pretenses that you can put up
You're
at that
completely
point.
vulnerable.
You're completely vulnerable. Your entire personality comes out at that point, where you can actually stand the pressure. You can either stand it, go through with it, and forge on, or you can actually just break down crying, which many interns do, and it's a big cause of mental health issues around the hospital. But what I found is with those things, what helps, having a good array of hobbies to complement your daily life helps in the weirdest ways. And there's a story. There's actually 2 stories. Ashiq may empathize more as well. He may also follow up on these. But when you're auscultating someone at odd hours and you are so tired and you're finding it difficult, there's often not a senior to help because they're actually upstairs doing the surgery, and you can only call them once you've made your assessment. So you actually have to make the diagnosis on your own. I've found that when you put your stethoscope to the chest, there's a whole lot of stuff going on apart from what's in the chest, heart sounds, breath sounds, and also people screaming in the casualty. So you have to really focus. But I found that detecting a heart murmur, like if there's a heart sound which is abnormal, you often have to be quite in good rhythm and quite good harmony. And I found tapping your foot in time with the heartbeat, as we learn in music, oral skills.
Yeah. It's an oral skill.
It's an oral skill that you learn, time signatures and melody. And often I joked with our teacher, Ms. Greenwood, you know what? It's unbelievable how everyone has a 4 out of 4 time signature for their heartbeat. I mean, come on now, where's the 6 out of 8? But unless they're in atrial fibrillation or have to have an arrhythmia. But basically you tap it. You actually tap it. And you say, wait, I'm hearing this during the contraction phase and I'm hearing this during the relaxation phase. And our experiences through our exams in music, where you have to actually listen to oral quite effectively, is that having a good oral skill through your ears helps you detect that murmur. You actually can detect the timing of the murmur quite nicely, and also by timing it, you regulate your own rhythm and you don't get stressed. You just tap your feet or you tap your finger, and by doing that, you calm down yourself. Your breathing becomes more in sync, and it actually helps you calm yourself down quite a bit, and you actually relax yourself. And
it's actually very interesting because if you think about it, it's only through music that you understand the concept of a time signature.
Yes.
So you can relate that to your work, but for someone else that doesn't understand that concept, it's a whole different interpretation, isn't it?
It is.
Which relates to our earlier conversation about how by learning many different things, you learn novel solutions to problems that you never thought you would find. There was a good friend of ours who fought in the Israeli war, one of the female soldiers, and after she left the military service, she trained in music therapy. And we actually did a session with her, where she came over to our place with a few friends from Japan who came from Toyota. And all they did was they just brought like a series of instruments, and they said, this is what they use.
Traditional
instruments.
Not even...
Yeah, and they said this is what they use to help post-war victims overcome post-traumatic stress disorder, is to help them find...
They were actually tribal in nature.
Yes, the instruments, very native
like a
traditional instruments.
Violin, saxophone.
Yeah. And what they did was they teach the trauma victims and victims of war to control their breathing by finding rhythm in the music, which is very interesting for me. And then we tried it, and eventually like what they do is they'll set a beat, and then you play whatever. So you can play whatever comes to mind, but then eventually everyone together gets into the beat, and that helps them.
Yes. And I often found classical music, having a good experience in classical music, when you understand all of these different details, it often it assists you quite a bit. But everyone listens to music, everyone listens to pop music, there's different genres all the time, but I don't think people are very mindful of what they're listening to. And I think the moment you get more mindful, it can help you in a lot of ways.
Interesting that you say that.
Achieving that central calm.
Even be more mindful of things like music and rhythm will make you more mindful of your breathing. And there are many studies which show that the breathing helps you control your physiology. And approach problems with a calmer.
But that was actually going to segue into my second story, which I wanted to say about when same story, 34 hours post-call, you're still walking around, you feel like you're the Walking Dead, and what's going to pull you through? So you have to still stand through the operation. It's one of those things where you still have to, whether you're assisting or whether you're actually doing the laparotomy, it involves a lot of standing. And you have to sit through that, and sometimes some procedures can go on for quite a few hours. So what is the best way? I found that initially, you're overcome by a tide of exhaustion, and you actually feel like sleeping, and you feel like sometimes you actually want to scrub out because you say, I need to sit down and I need to take a break. But I just found that some of my experiences from martial arts, specifically, where you regulate your breathing more, by breathing through your nostrils and exhaling through your mouth in a very slow and in a more deliberate fashion. And also releasing the tension from your center. In Chinese martial arts, we call it the Dang Tian, where a lot of your true power comes. So you loosen your shoulders, you loosen your peripheries, but you essentially drive energy from your center, and you reflect that through your deliberate breathing. That essentially helped me through many of my calls, many of my difficult calls. I think just becoming more mindful of your stance, your posture, your position, the way you breathe. That's one key way for you to overcome exhaustion, and that is transcendence in its own way. And that's just by becoming involved in Chinese martial arts or any form of martial arts or sport. Just becoming more aware of your
body
and posture.
So that body mind
connection. Body awareness. I think there's something very interesting that I'd like to discuss with you after the podcast, if you'll remind me.
Of course.
Because I can elaborate on this in a bit more detail, not on the podcast.
Of course.
Both of you are going to go into surgery.
Yes.
You're going to specialize. What's the attraction to surgery?
Ashiq is burning to answer this question.
I've often talked about this.
Ashiq is burning. Go for it.
Well, I think so far it makes the most sense to it's a singularity which combines almost all of our interests, or a large portion of them. You've got the fine motor skills that we've developed through many of our hobbies, piano, the martial arts. There's strong focus on outcomes and precision, on instant results, which I find very satisfying. The continuous innovation in the field, technological developments. And then there's also the other essential aspects that drive choice of occupation in many people. It's good compensation generally. I suppose everyone has to make that big decision in medicine at some point. They either like medical or they like surgical. In more invasive, less invasive. And I think in terms of
it's often a difficult
decision. And it's not for everyone, because there are many factors one has to consider in specialty. And there are other things that you have to consider: quality of life, time with family, time for your hobbies, bread and butter cases that you'll see every day. And I think specialty surgeries offer a mix of that appeal to myself and from our discussions as well, Ishq as well, appeal to us the most currently.
During internship, we got a good exposure to general surgery. So we did that and we enjoyed it quite a lot, but we still feel that but the both of us would like to branch off into another field of surgery. That I feel that there's more to be discovered. So we love surgery, but I think the particular field of surgery we still need to elucidate. I found it quite difficult choosing because I loved Ashiq too, but from my personal adventure through medical school, I found it very difficult choosing what I would want to become. And at different phases of my life, I had different ideas of what I would become. I had different preferences. In medical school, I loved all of the subjects from anatomy all the way to some form of zoology, but parasitology and microbiology I thought of, some form of cardiology, rheumatology appealed to me at the time because of how multisystemic it was, endocrinology even as well, because internal medicine was actually my favorite rotation throughout medical school. Internal medicine because I just enjoyed it a lot. I enjoyed reading around it. It was very, I feel like I had a good control over the clinical presentation, the syndromes like heart failure and pneumonia and tuberculosis. The pathophysiology interested me a lot. We didn't. What was also a bit of a spanner in the works was we graduated after experiencing a COVID academic year, so we didn't actually get a lot of surgery experience. I feel that if we got more surgery experience, it may have tipped me in that direction throughout medical school. But after I graduated and I did internal medicine as a specialty as an intern, I did enjoy it, but I couldn't see myself becoming a physician anymore because I wanted some form of.
Do you think it appeals to the excitement that you say you experience in casualty?
I think it did. I think largely, and also from the direct result of taking someone to theatre and using your own hands and seeing because we're so immersed in some form of art all the time, and suturing the abdomen is also a form of art. So I feel seeing your hopefully in the future masterpiece. And saying you did a seamless suture, I mean that's something quite satisfying. And also throughout my experiences in casualty, we never got much suturing experience, but I think one of the reasons why suturing came so naturally is because of good finger dexterity through the piano skills. I feel like good ligament laxity and good experience with the keys and the piano may in some subtle indirect way may have contributed to good suturing skills and good surgical skills with fingers. And also palpating, during palpation, during the clinical exam of your patients, your fingers are much more sensitive to things. You're looking for an enlarged liver, you're looking for an enlarged spleen, you're even looking for a cardiac impulse. And I feel if your fingers are more seasoned in terms of whether you've practiced the piano for hours a day or whether you've done any other forms of arts which involved a lot of handwork. Even martial arts itself involves quite a lot of finger power and strength. But through that power and strength, you actually make your fingers softer and more sensitive to things. So I think that may definitely have helped. So I think surgery is definitely in the cards going forward.
Okay. Tell us about the book that you wrote, The Great Medical Student Odyssey.
Yeah, thanks. I think it's a compendium of many of the things that we've discussed in the podcast so far, and I call it an odyssey because it is. Many people don't really know what it takes to get into healthcare and what that means. You connect with many people from all walks of life, and you get a glimpse into the suffering, into deep raw human experiences, suffering, death, a mother giving birth to her first child. Those are powerful extremes of human experience. And I thought, you know what, there are many great stories to be told here, and that's a part of what an odyssey does. It's a journey that takes you through many great themes in life. And that's what I wanted to write about, because 6 years is a long time, and we've seen everything from seeing a patient die to the first time to the COVID pandemic, which affected the entire world. And those are stories I had to tell. And seeking a connection between all these things that we've discussed now and how that plays into healthcare was an area of great interest of mine. And I thought to myself, I've always enjoyed writing. how am I going to do this? So I set aside a few minutes every day, even at 10 minutes, just writing something that I would be thinking about during the day. And I said, you know what? If I do this continuously for a few years, maybe I can come out with a piece of work that I can share with people. And I found a very helpful publisher in Cape Town, an independent publisher. And within 2 weeks, it was published on Amazon and a few local bookstores, and the rest is history.
We're still yet to get a copy of his book. His own family is yet to get a copy of his book. So if anyone has been asking around why they haven't gotten a signature copy of his book, I think they should come to us and ask why hasn't his own twin had a copy of his book. I've been bugging him for years for it, but he said, no, you'll get it. And I was like, oh.
Well, we should at least put the links in the video
With
description
pleasure.
so people can order this book.
It will be an honor.
Autographed copies will be on request.
And I just, with his book, I remember one of his chapters, if I'm not mistaken, don't mean to steal it, Tandia, but his chapters were were nicely arranged according to the rotations we did, and we did one of our rotations rural in final year medicine, where we went to community, do some community work as part of our family medicine rotation, and a good period of growth for us. We were more independent than usual because we were away from home and we had to get used to being out of the comforts of our own household. Especially, that was a big turning point for us because apart from the fact that we had to be independent, we had each other, so it was a bit of a cheat. But also, during those 6 weeks, we wanted to continue the piano studies and also the martial arts. So that was an interesting experience for us. We said, how are we going to do this? And we said, wait, we can either say no, we can continue it after 6 weeks like any sensible person would, or we said no, how are we going to do this? So the first thing we did was we approached our martial arts teacher and we said, we're going away for 6 weeks and we want to continue training with you. And he said, well, how's that physically possible? And we said, maybe what we can do is, let's do something where maybe we could do a Zoom thing where sometime during the week, you can give us a video and we'll practice the moves and we'll video ourselves and send it back to you. And that worked out. We actually ended up continuing doing our martial arts practice even in the rural area with no internet connection. So whenever we got an internet connection, we'd quickly send it through to him and say, hope the video sends, it's such a big video. And piano-wise, I mean, we were getting so stressed about it because we had 6 weeks and we said, you know what can we do? There's no way you can actually send videos without practicing anything. So we the crazy people that we are, we went and we got a portable electrical piano. And then for just 6 weeks away, and we said, no, we can't stop piano for 6 weeks. So we said, we are buying an electrical piano, and we did that. We just bought one from, I think, of the musical store from the Pearls Mall, and I said, please, we need this, and we need it now. And he said, do you have at least one of these? Because, usually they're out of stock. And he said, yes, this is the last one, you can take it. So we continued our piano playing, even in rural areas. So, we continued our hobbies wherever we went. And always found a solution.
That relates to your first question as well. You'll make time if it means enough.
If you really love it, I think if I may add to the normal line of if you really love something, you're gonna make time to find for it. I think I'll add to it by saying if you really love something, you have to be crazy enough to find the time to find for it. You can't just say I'm going to do it. You have to actually say, wait, I'm going to do something crazy. I'm hoping it's going to work. I hope it's going to work. I mean, the guy can easily say, no, I'm sorry, I can't do a video for you. You're going to have to come after 6 weeks. But by just asking, let's try something new. Then you'll say, you know what, these guys are enthusiastic. I'm going to do this. And maybe it opened up avenues by saying, you know what, maybe I can actually do lessons by social media. I mean, it only leads to benefits, but it just takes from you the impetus to ask.
That really shows the drive because they say if it's important enough to you, you'll make an effort, and if it's not, you'll make an excuse.
Absolutely.
You're right, 100%.
Absolutely.
So you found a way. So let's talk about the martial arts.
Lovely.
You practice Kung Fu, and I think possibly what's misinterpreted by most people is that they perceive martial arts as about fighting, when it really isn't.
Western approach.
So let's talk about the other benefits in your life, how this impacts you.
It's interesting that you say that because knowing you, you're a seasoned martial artist yourself, Mr. Sai, and many of these points you'll be able to draw parallels with as well, I imagine. we actually got into Kung Fu when we were in our second year of medical school. Ishq and I were looking for a form of exercise that fit our interests. And we've always been interested in Kung Fu, but I think at a superficial level. Watching Kung Fu movies and you think, oh man, this is so cool. I want to do these superhuman acts of strength.
You want to fly in trees, you throw swords, you throw darts.
Yeah.
And we reached out to the head of the Chinese Martial Arts and Health Center. And we've been training there for 8 years now. And our understanding of it has deepened. Our trainer told us that martial arts is not for fighting. It's not essentially. Not just for fighting. It's not for just self-defense purely either. It's used for what it needs to be used for. That struck me as quite interesting. And over time, our appreciation of the combination of spirituality, physicality, and promotion of the mind-body connection with that martial arts can give you is something that I started to understand more. And I think you can get that from any art that you do for long enough, especially in the martial arts, whether you're training in sistema, karate, judo, boxing. It's the fact that you're willing to put in many hours of time, blood, sweat, and effort into something that makes you a stronger person in every aspect of your life.
That's what Kung Fu means.
Kung Fu means, that's the direct translation.
Having a Kung Fu.
Kung Fu means time and energy. That's the direct translation from Chinese to English. And for our instructor told us when we started, Kung Fu isn't just fighting. Being a doctor is Kung Fu. Training in the piano is Kung Fu.
Any form of expertise, time and energy.
That requires time and energy.
Being a pianist can be a Kung Fu.
It just so happens that developing the body is also a form of Kung Fu, which is what the martial art became known as. And that's what I feel has added immense value to our lives. That understanding that if you put enough time and effort into something, you will find a way to overcome a challenge because it means that much to you. That's something that has enriched my life a lot.
We just recently graded to the next level. After being 7 years in the system, we've graded to blue shirt level. And being senior Kung Fu students, I think it makes me reflect on my journey throughout martial arts. Because it was quite comical to me because the progression was, this is how it worked out, where we came back from our travels through Far East Asia. We went away for quite a while. I think it was about 6 to 7 weeks away, where we went to both Japan and China. And through our travels, we were exposed to a lot of things there, spiritually and of course mentally. And we came back with those experiences. And I think what triggered it, what precipitated the sudden decision was we watched a Kung Fu movie again, of course, because they're very enjoyable.
Which one was it?
It was Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon.
Okay.
It was excellent in the way it was done, and that was the second time I watched it. And I just said on the couch, I'm making a decision. And then Ashiq asks, what's your decision? And I said, tomorrow morning I'm sending an email to the first Kung Fu school around Durban, and I'm going to see what they say. I'm going to see what they say. And then basically, I just searched Kung Fu schools available in Durban. 2 came up.
Yes.
I sent emails to both of them, and I remember what the email said. I said, it was short and sweet. Hi, sir or madam. I didn't know that, the honorific was Sifu at the time.
Yes.
But I said, hi, sir or madam. We are prospective Kung Fu students. We very much interested in joining your classes, and we would love to meet you sometime to discuss going forward. Yours sincerely, Ishq Pramchand, and please hopefully answer this email as soon as possible because I'm very excited to join your program. One of the other schools around the area was closed. They didn't operate anymore, but I got an email later in the afternoon, very prompt. It said, hi Ishq, you can come in on Thursday and we can talk about it. Come to this address. You will find our Kung Fu school with the dragon painted on the windows.
Okay.
And I said, definitely a good direction. Like, on Argyle Road, opposite the Mr. Price. I said, I will not miss it. So I sat down and, like any extremely novice budding martial arts student, I just asked, nice to meet you, and I'm just very interested to know what your program has. And I just said, is this a myth? I presented to him, this is my thought of what Kung Fu is. Can you please elucidate this for me? Because I said, I watched this movie and I've seen people flying around and throwing daggers with absolute precision, making it look effortless. And will I get to that stage where I will essentially be able to fly? And then he said to me, you will if you believe you can. And I said, that is excellent. And I said, I'm signing up for your classes immediately. If you believe in Kung Fu, you will. And I said, excellent, I'm already signed up. And 7 years down the line, Ashiq and I, we feel we've matured much more throughout the process, and we've started to use weapons. We essentially been using the longsword, the Dao, for 2 years, and we've just found more meaning in that weapon. And I guess I can relate to the fascination of people when they see weapons and they want to use them. And it's a much deeper skill. It's not just swinging around a weapon or just essentially throwing daggers when you use throwing swords. It has a lot of posture work and practice. You have to practice it extensively before you can even think you have an idea of it. It has a lot of deep meaning to it. And we learned that those swords, all of those weapons were used as martial weapons, as weapons of war. And often when they used to fight with them, the purpose was you have to effectively kill someone on the battlefield. And how do you do that? You have to essentially use the weapon in such a way where you can get to their weakest spots. And to get that precision, you have to practice hours with the weapon. I mean, we graded with the weapon as well, and doing a form in succession with weapon forms often requires quite a lot of endurance and stamina. So I feel that also it's a learning point going forward, that essentially when you want to do something like weapons or deep kung fu, you have to think about it quite a lot, because it's a mind-body connection you make, and also you have to put quite a lot of hours into it.
And Ishq and I have actually noticed that in a lot of martial arts that we've done. Even in Japan, we trained in Iaido with a samurai master there.
Able to wield a sword.
Ninjutsu as well with a shinobi master from Kyoto. We did karate for a while. We did boxing as well, and we noticed that there is that underlying element. And as a Systema practitioner, I'm interested to see if you notice that if the spirit is the same.
Yeah,
there are some common grounds, but a huge divergence as well. I can't talk too much about Systema. I'm not allowed to.
Oh, okay, I understand.
But it is a very unique philosophy. I'll be happy to talk to you about it when we're off camera.
Understood.
Yeah.
Excellent.
But that's at least a large value that martial arts has given to us. I think you need a strong body in order to have a strong mind and spirituality to do the things you want to do in life, and investing in some form or some art that allows you to express the potential of the body is something I would recommend for everyone.
One of the connections to make with Kung Fu and health and wellness and medicine, I think, at least from my understanding, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but Kung Fu and Chinese medicine has the concept of qi at the root, the energy flowed through the body. And this is consistent in Japan with ki and in India with prana. So I'm curious how you relate to this concept given the medical background, or is there an interplay?
Interesting that you say that, Mr. Style.
Very interesting question.
We're asked often about our understanding of Western and Eastern medicines. I think they all seek the same thing. It's the overall health of the individual and the community. They just do it in different ways.
Yes.
The West is more osteopathic medicine is considered allopathic medicine in the West. Allopathic medicine is more evidence-based, so it's more researched. You can see the outcomes, which is why it's more reliable as a source of treatment for global health.
Evidence-based
But
medicine.
that's not to say that osteopathic Eastern medicines don't give you the same thing. And the way the body works is studied what we call a priori, which is made from observations rather than study. So they'll notice things. And generally, like the idea of qi is focused on the center of balance in the body, physically, because all objects will have a center of balance more often than not. And where the gravity sits in the body. And that seems to be the central point. In Chinese medicine, at least, is that there's a specific point in the lower abdomen called the dantian, where
Chinese martial arts.
Yes, in Chinese martial arts, where energy collects, and how you use your body allows you to direct that energy in whatever way you wish. And in medicine, I suppose that there isn't really much focus on that than on balance and the flow of energy. It's much more scientific than that. But I think in Chinese medicine, at least, there is science behind it, but it just isn't articulated in a way that you can communicate in, say, a scientific journal. It's more like a feeling that you get when you say to someone your energy is flowing through you. You understand what it means by feeling it. But in terms of proving it scientifically, it's not always that easy.
Maybe it's something that happens, but we lack the technology to prove it scientifically at the moment. Because, say, for example, you consider the placebo effect. You're moving energy.
Yes. That's a true phenomenon in many medical conditions.
So, is it possible that we're talking about the same thing?
I think you could be making a point there, Mr. Sal. I mean, the placebo effect is a powerful area of study. I mean, there's a whole department in Harvard Medical School, I believe, directed to the study of the placebo. Believing something will work most likely will deliver the outcome you want, which is amazing, that the power of belief can change your body in a way through many means that can actually ensure a positive outcome, or at least increase the likelihood of a positive outcome, which is amazing.
That's interesting. But with the placebo effect, there is a predominantly cerebral aspect to it, meaning that to appreciate the placebo effect, you actually have to have someone understand what you're giving to them. Whether you're trying to, whether you're giving them a medication or any other medical procedure, the ability of the patient to understand that and process it is what underpins the placebo effect. So there's actually a lot of neurological input into that. So when dealing with, say, for example, something that's more, let's say, which is more in the line of chi, which is more from the energy which is derived from wherever in the body, I'm actually very curious still as to whether things which we can detect, such as pulse rate or blood pressure or vital signs, whether those are reflections of something maybe a bit more philosophical, whether derangements of those may be representative of derangements of chi within the body. Say arrhythmias may actually be derangements of the electricity within the heart system, or dementia may be derangements of the neuronal electrical conducting circuit within the brain. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't, depending on whether one believes in the philosophy of that or not. But maybe it is, because there's a lot of things which we don't have explanations for. I mean, many doctors throw around the word genetics, idiopathic, unknown, etiological process, not fully elucidated as yet.
Yes.
Maybe it's because there's more studies to be done, or perhaps it could lean towards the argument that maybe those processes are not to be understood, and maybe they vary between individuals. Maybe some people who supposedly have the same background, such as in twin studies, often there's different outcomes in identical twins of the same genetic code. But why is it that some, say, with some disease processes, why is penetrance different with one twin compared to the other? Maybe that could be an interesting viewpoint from a philosophical perspective in that way. And just adding on to Ashiq's note about allopathic and non-allopathic forms of medicine, the traditional medicine in South Africa, Durban, we've been exposed to quite a lot of it, especially through our rural rotation. I remember writing up a paper on traditional forms of medication and how it affects patient perspectives. And what we see all the time is the isiZulu concept of omeko. Basically, it's something that presents like cellulitis. Medically, it does present as cellulitis, but the process of it occurring is very different. And it's amazing how the belief in that condition, based on your cultural upbringing, affects the outcome. In something like this umeko, basically it occurs as a result of, usually, say if there's, from what my understanding of it is, after speaking with a traditional healer in Ishawe, is that it's usually as a result of bad blood between someone else, where someone has put umuti or medication in a spot of your household or the area where you live, or some place which you frequent, and you step on that, And apparently that infects the area of the lower limb, and that has the potential to spread to the brain and spread to other organs. The underlying pathophysiological process is very different. So, and their management is different. Their use of herbal medication is much more advocated for. And those herbal medications, they may have their benefits, but at the same time, many of them have very, very adverse side effects, such as hepatotoxicity, liver injury, and we see it all the time. Patients present with jaundice all the time in that way. So, tying that in again with traditional belief and a belief with chi and flow of energy, the isiZulu culture also do have a belief in that, is that your inner homeostatic mechanisms are not in line. That may be another way to discuss your chakras or whatever way you say it.
The power of belief in
It's the power of belief, and it's maybe this word of chi, the energy which flows throughout your body, maybe that's the gatekeeper of balance within your body, and different cultures express it differently.
Because
that's what I've,
it's
after talking with many
interesting
patients.
You say that, because it's sort of like many cultures, as Ishq is saying, describe the flow of energy through the body, and and if you have problems like mentally, they'll describe it as like a blockage in your body, it's sort of like this amorphous element that's compared to like water that's supposed to flow freely throughout the body, and that belief and how you transfer that vastly affects health. I mean, many people have, I don't know, usually it seems to be concentrated in the abdomen,
perhaps that's where I think maybe because most of your vital organs are there.
Perhaps, and also and even now there's more studies coming out about the relationship between the gut health and mental health. But the power of belief in and how it affects your health is an interesting point that you raised. There's the interesting study about this disease called Takotsubo cardiomyopathy. It's a disease where extreme stress can sort of shock the heart and change its shape, and in some tribal communities in South America that practice this form of voodoo magic, just the idea of if somebody cursed you and you believed you were cursed, the sheer shock of that was known to give some people serious cardiac defects. Very interesting, and it's an interesting, unusual, helpful example of how belief can affect your well-being.
It's like an octopus trap. That's what Takotsubo means, where it's like in Japan when they used to capture octopi. I'm not sure if they use this practice still now, but to capture it, it's in almost a flask, but it's shaped like a little bit of a jar, and it captures the head of the octopus. And the head of the octopus is not completely circular. It's kind of a bit curved with a bit of an oval. So the heart dilates in that way. When you get a sudden shock and you have catecholamine, stress hormone-induced stunning of the heart, that certain region of the heart balloons almost, and it looks like an octopus trap on echocardiogram. So that's what's even more interesting I found throughout my discussions with a lot of patients and a lot of people from different backgrounds, is that the myth that the center of the body is the heart is actually not. It's not commonly accepted. I always, before I got into medicine, I always thought the center, of the body is the heart, and that's it. All of your energy comes from there. But it's not. People often think that the center of the body is actually often the center of the body in the lower regions of the body. That was very interesting to me. That most people say, the center of the body is the chest, that area, and they point towards the heart, and actually it isn't.
I think there's quite a few cultures that believe that the center of all your energy will come from your groin.
Yes,
that region.
Your procreation. And,
yes.
It's where your energy, your lower energy centers are, I guess.
Absolutely. And there must be. I'm sure there must be some truth to that as well, because it'd be arrogant to think if we know everything in medicine at this stage. There's so much that's being discovered. You never know where answers would come from.
Yeah, especially with the pregnant female. I mean, the pregnant female is a different physiology entirely. Their whole body system changes in response to a developing fetus. And often, in some cultures, as we've traveled, we've found that the Aztec culture often reveres the woman as the leader of the community because of the amount of sheer endurance and power she must have to go through childbirth. Many of their monuments and architectures they encompass the pregnant woman, the gravid woman. It's very interesting. It's so different from other cultures, such as in the West, like North America, Europe, where even in the Middle East, where certain populations of women are seen as secondary to males, according to cultural upbringing. But in South America, it was so refreshing to see that the woman is appreciated as someone of absolute strength.
Fascinating. This leads on to another discussion, your travels, because you're both exceptionally well traveled. I think it's 65 countries and counting.
Yeah.
So what do you learn? What do you pick up? How does this color your life?
It's probably one of the foremost valuable experiences or aspects of our lives that have shaped who we are. What amazed me about all these countries that we visited to, and probably one of the most important things I've learned about it, is that fundamentally we're all pretty much the same. No matter where we come from, you're from the US, you're from South Sudan, Far East Asia, India. The human experience is very much similar. And that there are more good people in this world than there are bad. And from a young age, everyone's taught, you don't talk to strangers. Fair enough, more often than not, that is the case. But sometimes the friendliest people you'll meet are people you've never met, and they just want to give you everything that they can. Ishq and
had quite a few experiences
like that. I mean, Ishq and I, we were once traveling through rural Russia. It was during the World Cup, in the last one that was in Russia, and somehow we booked a series of tickets without even knowing where the stadia were. And they were traveling across Russia is like traveling from one continent to the next.
Of course, we can think we can do Russia.
So to get from one stadium from one stadium to the next, we had to drive. There was one drive we had to make, which was 13 hours. 13 hours to rural Russia.
Yeah.
With this Azerbaijani guy who was willing to drive 300 km per hour on those rural roads,
overtaking trucks,
just barely missing the truck.
Well.
So I don't know how he did it.
It's like he has experience in that.
But when we stopped by a train station in rural Russia, there were some people who've never seen an Indian person before, and they're looking at us. And then the first thing they do is they start smiling. They bring us into their house. They start pouring a shot of vodka for my dad. They're giving us fresh strawberries, and they don't know us from a bar. So
and they said, "Where do you come from? Tell us about your story. We've never seen people like you before."
And that's what I love about travel is that it makes you believe in the goodness of humanity and our commonality as human beings, despite our color, creed, race, whatever.
It's an amazing to learn, especially learning the languages of the time. I think we picked up on a lot of languages elsewhere, but especially going to the East, I immersed myself in a lot of Japanese and a lot of because when we went to Japan, we went for such a long time. And I ended up getting a series of books. It was quite effective Japanese from zero, because I knew nothing about Japanese at the time. And it was quite a nice progressive thing because you're so overwhelmed by the different writing system, first of all. And I think being brought up in a English, Afrikaans, isiZulu background, I wanted something different. And I was quite and what was appealing to me was the different character system.
Yes.
I only got a touch of that in school when we went to Russia once, and I just learned the Cyrillic alphabet. I hope that's how you pronounce it, Cyrillic or Cyrillic. And I just learned it, and I said, this is very interesting. I'll get back to studying Russian when I can. And I couldn't get back to it in time. So when we went to Japan, I said, let me use this as an opportunity. I ordered the books off Amazon, and while I was in Japan, I learned. I finished the books, I learned all of the theory that was in there, and it was invaluable because everything I learned, I applied whenever I went out. So if you'd order something at a restaurant, I ordered it in Japanese, and they were very fascinated. I mean, seeing an Indian person speak Japanese, Japanese fairly confidently, and even writing Japanese in you want to just kind of ask for directions, and if you don't know where it is, you just write it in Japanese characters. And they're more interested to know where did you learn?
Happen?
What's the connection? And Japanese people will definitely show their interest when they say, and they'll bow to you quite a few times out of respect. And I just said that's the one way to connect with people. Have the humility to learn the language, and just make a solid effort at it. If you're even there for 1 week, learn the cheat sheet of phrases, and always learn the phrase in any language, and just substitute the language with another language. For example, I am not very fluent in the language, but I'm still learning this language, and just say I can speak a little bit. I'm not that experienced, but I'm still learning. Then they'll appreciate it. You're not of course, you're not
Yes.
professional, but at least you try.
Yeah.
Learn the good morning, learn the thank you, learn the please, and people will actually appreciate it. When we went to Japan, I don't know how many discounts we got of stuff.
Yeah,
for
just
just
speaking
speaking
the
Japanese.
Really?
You know, slashed from like 1,000 yen to like 600 yen because people thought like, you know what, these people are locals. And even if they didn't, they said, no, these people are just funny. They're like coming up to us and they're laughing with us. They're enjoying the day with us. They want to just invite us for a cup of tea. And they said, you know what, you're the first tourists who have ever been so friendly to ever want to like engage with us in Japanese. So yeah, take this for free.
That's the most
I said,
powerful.
thank you so much.
That's a very valuable tip if you go anywhere. To
Yeah.
learn the language, even the basics of
Yeah.
it completely changes the people you interact.
And like please and thank you, like in Japanese, arigato gozaimashita, that's thank you, and like please, like adding something and or onegaishimasu at the end.
Yeah.
People change the way they appreciate, like they just appreciate you more.
Yeah.
Even if it's just please and thank you.
So you both speak several languages, and is this because of your travels?
Largely.
I think so because when we were younger, we used to travel and we would be exposed to it, but we wouldn't actually fix our minds to it.
Yeah.
But a lot of the other languages also came out in weird ways. Like I did dramatic arts for in school, and they taught quite a lot of Italian there. So then
Yes.
I also that also impressed me quite a bit because I liked the very
Yes.
sing-song type of. I liked the intonation. I thought it was very fun initially. But then I bought a phrase book online. I just looked online. I said, Italian books for the beginner, and I ordered it. And when we went to Italy later that year, I said, I'm going to try this. I'm going to order stuff. And Italians are very friendly people as well. And like they'll just tell you like hey, it's like so cool. You're like so friendly, and like you're actually wanting to speak Italian, and they'll teach you stuff from their language which you can only learn from that city. I love those moments.
So do you speak the same languages, or do you learn different?
No,
different
actually,
languages?
we didn't know. We just developed different interests.
So what do you speak?
English, Afrikaans, well, apart from the normal, and then isiZulu we learned in medical school.
Yeah.
It's primarily medical, but I improved it over time by speaking it as much as we can. Japanese, quite a bit of Italian, and also conversational Mandarin, but that's the one I'm working on
Mandarin,
now.
okay.
I love that as well. I find that to be a nice challenge, but slow. I'm taking it quite slowly because you have to, essentially, if you pronounce something differently, you could be swearing at someone.
Yeah.
So I'm being quite careful about that one. But
And you, Ashiq?
Pretty much the same. I haven't spoken much Mandarin, but I've been learning a lot of Spanish. In fact, we have a lot of Spanish friends, and conversational Spanish has really helped, especially because the Latin root languages are pretty similar.
Yes.
And it's not even like traveling worldwide to experience these things. I was in theater the other day with the orthopedic slate, and one of the seniors, he was, I thought he was from Egypt initially, but then I found out that he studied in Russia. So then I just said, at the end of the theater, I just said spasiba to him, and he said, wait, what did you say to me? And I said spasiba. I heard you study in Russia, so I'm saying thank you to you.
Yeah.
And he said, what else do you know in Russian? And I said, I asked him, you know what, I know how to say, like, how are you, kaktela, and like, Khoroshov, I'm fine. And he said, where did you learn all this stuff? And I said, you know what, you'll never believe. Sit down, I want to tell you a story. And I wrote his name in Cyrillic and stuff, and he's saying, that's excellent.
It's
like
funny.
An
It's
Indian
actually,
guy talking.
it's amazing how that will help. Even once there was this one, there was one Cuban doctor who was like, he was known for being like really vicious as a senior in when we were training in PT Maritzburg, and Ishq and I were like 10-15 minutes late. We were the last people to come into the class, and he looks at us fuming, and I just say I remember apologizing to him profusely in Spanish, and he paused,
saved us a lot.
and he paused and just said, sit down. That changed everything.
Yeah.
Just that alone saved our
And
lives.
at the end, he's habla español. It's very fun. And it's very different. It's like it's something you also have to put quite a bit of effort in, but it's also it's essentially so much to learn, but it's so rewarding, because when you go overseas and you meet someone and you say, you know what, I know a few words in this, and some people will surprise us. Some people from overseas will speak Zulu with us. And they think, what?
Really? Wow.
Like, you from South Africa? And they'll say, you know what, Sawubona. And I'm saying, amazing.
Wow.
You can't even speak complete English, and you're telling me isiZulu. That's brilliant.
This is what you're trying to do. You're trying to form stronger connections with people. And what better way than to talk to the person?
It would be a crime to go through this podcast and not talk about music.
Oh yeah, of course. Fair enough.
Oh gosh.
Two pianists, three pianists
Three
at the
pianists.
table.
Yes.
How did you get started in your music?
When we were kids, we started at age 4. and our mom actually, she was a musician in her time. So she played, I think it was the violin, but she actually took music to matric. So she started us off. Basically, we got a miniature kids piano, you know, the one like only a few octaves. We started playing there. Having a bit of experience there, we started with lessons at school. And of course, as a kid, you don't appreciate the magnitude of what you're actually doing. So you just do it because you have to do it. And you find you're playing keys, you're playing scales. But I think throughout our years, we kept going with it, we kept with it. I think it's only after we matured enough, after matric. I remember that we went into med school and we were in Scotland at the time, actually. And I remember I was just kind of like, just relaxing and we were on holiday, and I said, you know what, I'm going to give my music teacher a message. I'm going to say, it can't stop here. I mean, just because I'm in university, I can't let it just go away. So I asked her, I said, you know what, Miss Greenwood, can we please continue lessons with you? And she said, but like, aren't you in university? Aren't you busy and stuff? And I said, no, I'll make time for it. It'll be different, but I'll make time. And we just kind of kept going all the time. So it was, I think, after university that we actually, after school, that we actually really appreciated it. Because we started to get into more difficult pieces. We had the ability to play those pieces, and extremely rewarding because it sets you apart from the rest. A lot of people can't play the instrument, and not because they can't. It can be accessible like a grade 1 or a grade 2. But the higher you get, you actually feel quite humble that you can actually play an instrument like that. So yeah, a lot about parental influence, and also the both of us did it at the same time, so we kept pushing each other all the time.
And we're just glad to have found a community here with you as well, Mr. Sal, to promote classical music and the love for it in Durban, which and because you know yourself, it's hard to find people who love the classics and developing an interest in instruments, and also carrying that through, not just through school, but for the rest of your adult life as well.
I think we're very fortunate in that respect to have the Pencil Club supporting us to give us the venue to host this Classical Music Appreciation Society, and that's very exciting for music, and also to have you gentlemen involved.
Thank
it's a
you,
pleasure.
Of course. It's such an honor.
It's a lot of value.
And it's just amazing because we've got to know you more and more, and it's so amazing to see that all of us, we've been doing piano for X number of years, but we all have different tastes in music. But for example, I've been exposed to Mozart, Chopin, you have been exposed to Liszt, Ashiq is also exposed to Beethoven as well. But what I find more amazing is that how we inspire each other to like different composers through the way we articulate them. You've inspired me with respect to a lot of Liszt pieces that I've never known existed.
I'm so glad.
You have, and Liszt is he's such an amazing pianist, but I'm actually surprised I actually didn't get more exposure to him. But the moment we had the concert with Yeoman Park, that was mind-blowing, but
exceptional.
Antecedent to that, you've actually inspired me with a lot of the pieces that you've exposed us to in terms of YouTube videos and just concerts. So just check this out, this video is cool, just read this about Liszt and whatever, and it got through to me. So I was very chuffed by that, because I'm always on the lookout for a new romantic composer.
I'm very happy.
It worked. Whatever you did.
Who are your favorite composers and your favorite pieces of music?
That's a tough one. I think they all have their charms. But I think out of the pieces I've been playing recently, including Debussy's Sweet Bergamask, I feel like a great connection to his works and the way he shapes the harmonies of his pieces, and Beethoven for sheer effusive energy and performance. I think those are the two pianists I felt resonated with me more recently.
Which is your favorite out of the Beethoven?
So many. I don't even know where to start. That's a tough one.
Maybe Appassionata.
Even his Moonlight Sonata, effusive, loved it.
Yeah.
That's one that comes to mind right now.
You mentioned the Appassionata. Well, we've planned the next recital on the 18th of August at the Pencil, and Christopher Dagan will most likely perform the Appassionata.
I can't wait. Looking forward to that.
Silent, you've just
You've given us something to look forward to for that.
always come through with the best surprises. Seriously.
And your favorite composers?
For me, I love the Romantic era. I feel a deep connection to Chopin's pieces. I've practiced a lot of his pieces, especially his valse in E minor and his fantasy in C sharp minor. I enjoy those a lot. I especially enjoy the minor works, the ones in the minor scale.
Key.
I do find them to be much more emotive. I find a lot of drive to them because what inspires those pieces is a very tragic love story often, and the love story doesn't extend itself to only their spouses. It's to a lost love or a child who passed away, and also his nocturnes as well. His nocturne as well in C sharp minor actually. So C sharp minor, I enjoy that as a scale in terms of its. The emotion it can bring out in pieces.
That's the C sharp minor nocturne is Opus 27 number 2.
Correct, yeah, absolutely. I enjoy Chopin. He is very simplistic in the way he writes.
Elegant.
Elegant, simplistic. I don't mean it at all in the way of in the bad way, but I say simplistic in terms of you can take a look at the stanza, but it's eloquently and it can be easily appreciated.
I think Chopin said that simplicity is the ultimate goal.
Well said.
Yes.
He achieved it
And
quite
elegance
well
is derived
with
from
his pieces.
that.
And learning his pieces, I found that his interplay in his fantasy, where he essentially, I don't want to get too technical, but what made me lean towards Chopin, because I've also done a lot of Mozart, I've done a lot of classical music, and I love those as well. Those are also very simplistic, but very profound at the same time, very eloquent. But I feel with the Chopin, I can relate to him because his works are much more tying into the tragic theme, much more. I wouldn't like to say profound because other pianists are also very profound, but also you get a greater mood from it in terms of it's much more moving. If you can relate it to an actual time or period in your life where you felt the same way, say through your first breakup or something seemingly not as meaningful, but say something that happened which was quite important or poignant to you. You can actually relate to it through some of his stanzas, his melodic runs, for example. Liszt does quite a few of those as well. So I feel that the Romantic era links that quite a bit. It was quite a good era of tragedy, but at the same time, revelation and realization. It helps you grow as a person. And his use of the pedal is excellent, so I do enjoy that. And his polyrhythms I enjoy quite a bit as well.
I think in the Romantic era they also had the benefit of the instruments expanding to allow them to make these expressions orally, because it's almost what drove the Romantic movement.
Yes.
That they had the ability to create the sound canvas that didn't exist before. Yeah.
Like Mozart, I've played most of his I think most of our exam pieces went around Mozart, and getting immersed in the classical era, like most of the characteristics are quite specific to the time. For example, like in the classical, you have to be quite in time and quite in beat. It doesn't allow for a lot of rubato and a lot of swing.
Pretty technical.
You'll have to explain rubato for viewers.
Yeah, of course. Sorry, I'm getting too musically technical. Like the pull and push of time, essentially. You, according to the musician, sometimes you feel like you can slow it down here and maybe increase the speed at times, but in total, you're still in the same time. But because I often feel like sometimes I want to do that. Like sometimes I feel like I should kind of like change it a bit here and there, not too much. So I feel like sometimes the classical can be quite good if you want to be quite regimental and quite in time. But maybe that's why I could lean towards the Romantic. Even Rachmaninoff does it as well. You can pull and push the time quite nicely, and I feel it adds a much greater effect. I'm not sure if you agree as well.
No, I agree with you completely, because all music, all dramatic music is tension and release.
Yes.
And when you can play with the rubato, you can increase the level of tension.
Yes, you can.
So you can hear this to dramatic effect when you listen to Wagner, for example, because Wagner will give you 3 hours of tension and a release right at the end. So you're listening to it and you're on the edge of your seat, and you go further and further and further, and he just won't give you the release.
That's exactly how Yeoman Park did it. I mean, when she played the Tottenhams, for example, it's excellently done. She did it so well, really. I know I shouldn't even disrespect her work by using words for it, because it was far beyond that. But excellent, really, really well done. And just listening to recordings of Tottenhams before the actual performance, it was far more valuable listening to it in person.
It was very powerful.
No, it's
extremely
powerful.
And so moving, really. I can't even. Her build-up of suspense was so excellently done. I can't even compare her to anyone else. She was, and to hear that in person was such an honor, really.
And well done for organizing that as well.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, and it takes a certain personality to pull off Liszt quite well. I feel like you have to have that drive, you have to have that ambition, you have to have that rock star personality where you have to. I think a pianist, Mitsuko Uchida, said it herself. You have to almost risk your life on stage. You have to essentially, that's all you're going to do, and you're just going to have to drive forth with it. And the passion and energy comes from that. You have to be so invested in the piece, and you have to articulate the piece in such a manner where it's as if you're playing it for the last time.
Yeah, especially with Liszt, you cannot play Liszt without passion.
No.
You can't at all.
He's one of those composers that wrote very meaningful pieces, and if you play it robotically or technically,
You lose
will
the
never
essence of
deliver the impact that was intended. So it must be played with passion.
Absolutely.
Which is something that I see we've all brought in different aspects of our lives.
Well, let's talk about that now, because this is about peak performance.
Yeah, absolutely.
And what would your definition be of a peak performance life?
If I were to summarize it, I'd say being honest with yourself and your experiences so that you can live the best possible life you can.
I would add to that and say, approaching your areas of interest as optimally as you can to the best of your abilities with the intention of inspiring and uplifting others to be able to achieve their greatest potential as well. I feel that is the end goal for most people. That's essentially beyond the peak of the pyramid. Self-actualization is you realizing who you want to be and the best possible version of yourself. But I feel assisting someone else and inspiring them through your own art is a step further.
Transcendence.
What habits do you think people should cultivate to achieve peak performance?
Yourself.
Starting with yourself. Starting with the self. Encompassing all the areas of self-development that we've mentioned. Find something that allows you to keep your body in good shape, because without health you can't have a good mind. Read often, especially from people who are experts in their field. Approach interacting with others with an open mind and learn from everybody else.
Yes.
And then if we expand that to the community and the world, always ask yourself and practice opportunities to add value to the lives of others.
And approach adult situations with childlike curiosity to learn as much as you can. I think I would say for someone to essentially do the best that they can, I would say be yourself and have confidence in being yourself. I think some people are scared to do that. I'd say know yourself well in terms of what you like. Do things because you want to do them, and once you do them, put everything into that. Don't put out all the stops. Don't feel that you should hold back for any particular reason. There's no excuse why you shouldn't be the best of what you can, or best version of yourself. And I feel that also a holistic picture of everything. Everything works together. Everything is a connection. Always read academically. Keep your brain stimulated. Keep your heart stimulated by increasing your heart rate through exercise. And also, just relax, have fun when you can. Just whenever you have time off, make sure you relax and have fun. Whatever it is you enjoy doing, whether you like sleeping in on a day off, or whether you like going to the mall, or whether you like meeting up with friends or family time, that's as important as everything else. Because I think once you rest and relax, you have enough energy to tackle the world after that.
Do everything with balance.
You have to. I think that's the only thing that, at the end of the day, it's a good balance. It's a good holistic picture.
And what do you think people should avoid to stay at peak performance?
Avoid things that disrupt that balance. Procrastination. Toxins for the body, toxins for the mind, whether that be ingested or through words, interactions with other people that try to corrupt your principles in search of good in this world.
Procrastination, and also Surround yourself with like-minded people. I think a toxin, as Ashiq said, is not only ingested. A toxin can actually be, it doesn't have to be a substance. A toxin can actually be a presence. So I feel like surrounding yourself with like-minded people, and this is coming from personal experience because I'm with Ashiq all the time. Surrounding yourself with someone who thinks like you forms your habits. That's the basis behind many of your habits.
You're the average of your 5 friends, closest friends, as you said.
5, sometimes even 1.
Yeah,
If you have 1 friend, I mean, that's good enough as well. So I feel that those are some major obstacles which can get in the way of your dreams and goals. And I think to debunk the myth, to become great at something, I mean, both of us are still learning, both of us are still getting there. We're definitely beginners at what we do. But on the path to greatness, I believe that it's just a simple principle. If you want to do it, work hard and go for it. If you want to, I mean, we've been doing exams for our entire life, still are doing exams. I think we're writing another exam in like 2 months, and it's essentially a lot of time on our hands. But at the basis of it, you can either procrastinate and tell yourself that you will do it, and you at some time you will actually put your mind down to it, or you could just go sit down, take the book and study and do all your hours. Mathematically, it's a guarantee. If you put a certain amount of hours into something, you're going to get it. And of course there'll be obstacles along the way. Of course there'll be a party that you'll miss. Of course there'll be the phone call from your friend, where are you on a Friday night? You know what, we need you here. You know, why essentially are you studying on a weekend? You shouldn't be doing that. I feel like even on a weekend, that's another thing. People often say a weekend is a time to just relax and do nothing. I actually feel like most of the learning occurs on the weekend. You work in the week and you study and reflect on the weekend. That's what I think. But at the same time, taking time off. I think those are some excellent steps.
We end every podcast with a few words. Usually there'll be a quotation or a poem, something that I've read that resonates with the guests, and I have some words here from Richard W. Livingston that I think applies to you gentlemen.
Oh, thank you.
A fundamental principle of education is to make the pupil realize the meaning of excellence, of the first rate, and to send him out of school and college persuaded that it is his business to learn what is first rate and to pursue it, not only in the profession by which he earns his living, but in all the great fields of life, and above all, in living itself.
I'm touched by that quote. Thank you so much. What an honor, Mr.
I think there's no better example than you two gents.
You are too kind.
Just fantastic human beings, and you exude everything: positivity, intelligence, talent, skill, humanity. It's a joy to know you.
And the feeling is mutual, Mr.
Absolutely.
We all learn from each other. And it's been such a great privilege to be on your podcast.
It's been an absolute pleasure.
And to many more successes together.
Such a pleasure. Thank you.
you.